bases dropped, July 24th. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning here in Atlanta, Georgia. SDH live on a Wall Pass Wednesday. If you are new to the show, Wall Pass Wednesday, we take your questions. We try to kick it back to you with answers. We'll ask some questions, too, and you can kick some answers back to us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. The questions on our mind this morning that we want to get into: Leagues Cup. Do you care? Should you care? Do you want to care? What does it need to be for you to care? You had Chicago lose 2-0 to Cruz Azul. Pretty complete performance from Cruz Azul. Just took them a little while. Great goal to open things up. LA Galaxy did show some heart, and they come back and get an equalizer against Tijuana, and they won on penalties. But does it matter to you? Let us know what you think about the Leagues Cup. There's a lot of talk about the Chicago Fire name, and we know that they are working on a move back to Soldier Field. There are some pages on their website that were discovered that we're talking about the move back to Soldier Field. So it's all but done. You're not going to break the lease with Bridgeview if you're not done with it. So part of that, though, feels like a rebirth of the club. Does that need to involve a name change? Because that had popped up, then it had kind of dissipated. Now it's sounding like maybe there's something to it. What are your thoughts on that? Do the Fire need to change their name? Do they need a rebrand and keep the same name? Or do they just need to field a better team? We'll also get into the transfer window and what you think about Atlanta United's possibilities here in the window with about another week and a half or so left of it. What do they have to do? What do they need to do? Do they need to do anything? Let us know what you think about all those. Any other questions you want to put on the table, please do so on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. But we're going to get into first a report that was released from an organization called Kick It Out, 25-plus years in Great Britain of campaigning for equality in football. It's a great organization that I've interacted with a few times during my time at Soccer in the Streets. They do pretty amazing work in terms of shining a light on some things that we do talk about here in the States, but has been a longstanding issue in the UK as well. And they just released their latest report, and it's a little troubling, to be perfectly honest. It's something that you would have hoped would have been decreasing by now, but discrimination reports in football rose by a third in the 2018-19 season, according to Kick It Out's latest reporting stats. Pretty troubling when you dig into it a little bit deeper, John, and it's something that, I guess with where things are in the world at times, I'm not exactly shocked, and I do wonder if maybe you're getting more reporting than you've ever had before, which is a good thing if that's the case. But man, it's just not what you want to hear.
No, and I think that I'm hoping that there is something of a correlation from the fact that you're getting an increase in reporting. Yes, it has risen by a third, but you are hoping that there are those who will continue to step up and shine a light on this kind of stuff. And to get into it a little more, faith-based discrimination, which from Kick It Out includes Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, rose higher than any other than across the period, reports increasing by 75%, which from 36 to 63, but nevertheless still up by 75%. Discrimination related to sexual orientation up about 10%, 62 to 68. Reports related to gender, same level. Disability discrimination reports dropped from 15 to 9. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I would recommend everybody just go ahead and dive in and look at it yourself. Obviously there's incidents having to do with social media and discrimination reports and things like that. And I know that with the increased use of folks and how these days we look down at our phones more than we seem to look at each other and have conversations, it's not a surprise that social media incidents have increased as well. But sadly, there's a part of me that says we're so much bigger and so much better than this. But at the same time, with everything that we're bombarded with in our daily lives, what we watch, what we read, what we see, what we're told, none of this surprises me. And it goes back to my original point. I would have loved to have thought that we were all bigger and better than this. But I think that when you have an organization like Kick It Out who continues to shine a light on these kinds of things, I think all it does, and this might sound somewhat Pollyanna-ish, but I think that if one person who hasn't seen the report can read the report, take the information with them, apply it forward, and then have that thought pattern rub off on others, hopefully you can get this kind of a turn. But when you have discrimination still going against faith-based, still going up against sexual orientation, still going through with social media, still with disabilities, this to me was something that I thought we all seemed to get out of our system when we were in elementary school and high school. When I was of a certain age, my grandfather was more than happy to grab the 18-inch ruler with the metal rod across it, and if you stepped out of line, you get popped in the butt. And you were taught right and wrong. And I don't know where that fall down happens these days either. But it's disappointing. Like I said, I'm pleased that there is more reporting, but it still disappoints me no end that we're still having to have these kinds of discussions to the levels that we're having them instead of having to turn this kind of stuff around.
And it's happening everywhere. I mean, this is an organization based in the UK, but it happens everywhere. It happens in the United States. It happens all over the Americas. It happens all over the world. A couple more bits of information, and highly recommend going to check this out over on their Twitter account. They dig into a little bit deeper into the reporting if you're not able to read the whole report that's at their website. Their Twitter is Kick It Out, and their website is kickitout.org. But a couple things that jumped out to me as I started digging deeper into it. The FA have not informed Kick It Out of the outcome in 79% of the 109 cases reported in grassroots football. 40% of those reports were from youth football, under 18. Those are the ones that really, really anger me, where you're dealing with kids dealing with this nonsense.
Yeah.
Been there, done that, seen it with my time with soccer in the streets, things that would blow your mind that have been said on a field by opposing players and or coaches and or parents to kids that I coached. And it's a problem, and it's a shame that it's happening like this in the UK as well. I don't know if there is anyone that compiles this type of information or tracks this type of information in the United States. I don't think state associations do. There's not an equivalent to a Kick It Out organization in the United States. MLS does good work with their Don't Cross the Line campaign and things like that, but I think it's more about the awareness rather than actually following up and tracking these sorts of things. They are, Kick It Out, they're compiling things a little differently in terms of social media and discrimination reports and how they're tracking it, because they want to be a little more thorough in how these things go. And it's something that Kick It Out has mentioned specifically with the rise of social media, that it's a giant issue in the game. Their CEO, Royson Wood, said, "Football reflects the society it is played and watched in, and these figures are sadly not surprising. The fact that racist reports have risen by 43% clearly shows the massive work that all of football still needs to do to challenge this. In 2019, we need to ask the question, what can we do better and what is not working? The sharp increase in faith-based discrimination is also worrying and represents a challenge to us all. What are we doing to address this intolerance?" And this is the part that I agree with just based off my experience here in the U.S. We feel that incidents at grassroots level are still underreported, and this could be due to the length of time it takes a complainant to get their case satisfactorily concluded. And even then, there's often disenchantment in the type of sanctions handed out. Seen that firsthand. I'll tell you a quick story before we move on to some other discussions. But I coached a team from East Point, Georgia. Overwhelming majority from Mexico. A couple other Central American countries were represented in my group as well, and it would fluctuate from season to season. But we played a match I believe we were actually in Marietta. We were in Cobb County. And one of my players was sent off on the other side of the field for something he said. I couldn't hear it. I was on the other side of the field. And when he came over after getting red carded, he's apologizing to me, and he said that he reacted badly and he shouldn't have reacted that way. I was like, well, what happened? And player on the other team, goalkeeper, told him to go back to Mexico. And player on my team cursed at him, was sent off. So I told him, look, you can't react that way, and talked about it from a team perspective about how it's hurting the team. These are teenagers, by the way. It was a U19 team. I think the player involved was actually 16. So talked about, of course, the part about, you can't put the team in the situation, all of that, but I also made sure that he understood that I understood why he reacted that way, because that was a very important part of it for me. After the match, I spoke to the referees about the situation and asked if the referee knew why my player cursed at the opposing player. And the referee said, no, he wasn't told. And I said, this is what my player told me. The AR put up his flag and signaled it. The referee, I think, was at midfield. There's no way he could have heard anything. The referee said, no, I wasn't told what was said to start it. I said what I was told, and he's like, I'm going to go talk to the crew, and I'm going to find this out, and it's going to be in the report, and blah, blah. I'm like, okay, fine. So I start walking away. Well, the AR came over in a kind of aggressive manner, which surprised me, and was talking about my player being out of control, and I said, I was told that this was said to my player, and that's why he reacted this way. Did you hear that? And the AR said, yes, I heard it. And I said, well, do you think that's a problem? And he said, no. That's like telling me to go back to Marietta. So at that point, I said, there's nothing else for me to say. I'm walking away. So I start walking away, and they still want to argue. Like, the ref crew is arguing with me at this point about it. The AR is, not the rest of the crew. Still arguing with me about it, that my player overreacted, my player was out of control, and this and that. When I talk to people at higher up levels about this, and what should I do? This isn't right. This shouldn't happen. I was told, 1, it would take at least 6 months for anything to actually be heard. 2, it probably wouldn't even get to that point because it wouldn't actually be brought to a hearing. So I don't have time for that. I'm trying to run a team, a soccer in the streets team, where I'm sacrificing a lot of my time, my money, trying to fundraise for it. I don't have time to commit to fight to that. So we let it go. That's the type of stuff that gets underreported. When I see Kick It Out say, we feel that incidents at grassroots level are still underreported, and this could be due to X, Y, and Z. Yeah, put my hand up. I've been there, done that. And a lot of organizations just literally don't have the time to really fight to change these things. And it's a shame. So when I see reports like this, it really does upset me, and it makes me frustrated that this game is a place for all to come and be involved in. And when people try to keep others out, no. That's not going to happen in this game, and it shouldn't happen. And I'm very grateful for organizations like Kick It Out that fight that, campaign against it, but also try to do something about it to change it. It's one thing to shine the light. It's another to actually put in the fight to get it changed. And I'm really thankful for a group like this. And I hope, 1, that it's not needed, and I hope that they can put themselves out of business because they do such a good job. And I hope that an organization like this is not truly needed in the United States. But I do wonder if it is, because I know that the situation that I had, and that's not the only one, but that's the one that always comes to mind for me, because you're dealing with teenagers being told these things. What scares me is that my teams that I was involved in had multiple times that these things like this would happen. I've talked to other people who had incidents. I don't know of any cases that were ever dealt with in any of those situations at the state level, at the national level. So it's frustrating, and hopefully someday it can all go away. But it's going to take work from groups like Kick It Out. So if you're not familiar with them, please go check them out. Kickitout.org, at Kick It Out on Twitter. Dig into this report a little bit. I really hope we don't have to keep talking about these types of reports, but there are times where we do, and this is one of them. So I really hope that this is something that maybe gets people's attention. And if it starts in the UK and comes over here, however it goes, I hope that we can get rid of all of this stuff. And yes, the chant that popped up during the Leagues Cup, that's part of it. That's got to go. And I know the cultural aspects of it, and I know those things of it, and I know that some people say it's not intended to be what it is. Well, sorry. No more. It's not. There's no way to justify it anymore. I was very glad to see Pancho Villa's army, which is essentially like the American Outlaws, Sam's army of the Mexican national team in the United States, the organized supporters. I was really glad to see Pancho Villa's army come out and make a very strong stance against it during the Gold Cup or in the build-up to the Gold Cup. That's amazing. That's great. It's going to take stuff like that. But it's got to go. It's getting better, I think, but it's not gone yet. So it's not. You can't just stop talking about it.
No.
That's part of it. That's all part of this. So I don't want to linger on this all day. We do want to talk about a lot of the good things about the game, but this is something that you do need to know about and you do need to keep an eye on, and it's something that has to be talked about for it to truly go away.
If you're of adult vintage, if you're a parent, I mean, just think about your actions and how they rub off on not just your kids, if you have kids, but how they rub off on anyone who's a child. And I just take a second and sit there and go, okay, if I do X, if I say X, if I act in a certain manner, you don't know who you rub off on. Could be your kid, could be somebody else's kid. Turns into a learned behavior. And there are certain things that should never be a learned behavior. And I'm hoping that we just all kind of keep an eye on what we're doing and who we're touching and who we're impacting and what we're saying. Because on the whole, I think we're better than this. There are tremendous individuals out there. I mean, think about what you and I see with the supporters groups, with the 17s and all the inclusion that is a part of everything in the everyday. And the faction T-shirt that the boss has mentions inclusion. You never know who you're going to touch. You never know when that moment's going to be. So it's kind of saying everybody be on your P's and Q's, but it's a larger thing than that.
I'm just going to ask people to respect one another. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Just be good stewards.
Just respect people. It's not even that. I mean, you cheer against teams, whatever. Cheer if you're playing. You talk trash to players. Yes, all these things happen. You can still be respectful. That's all.
Yeah.
Just be respectful. That's at a minimum. That's it. And this type of stuff is not respectful. And when you're dealing with kids and it's involving youth, then that's when I'm going to get angry about it. So that's it. That's the soapbox today. So go check it out at Kick It Out and kickitout.org. We're going to take a break, come back, get into Leagues Cup a bit. We'll also get into the Twitter timeline. So tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. Let us know your thoughts on a Wall Pass Wednesday. We'll be right back.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect. for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, July 24th, Wall Pass Wednesday edition. We're taking your questions, your comments. We started with some discussion about Kick It Out. And, Ike, man, I do see your comments. I honestly don't know enough, and I'm not going to speak for other people. But I'll tell you what I believe. Y'all does mean all, and it truly does, and it should. So that's all I can say is, yes, that's how I feel about it. And I do know that the whole situation last year with the MLS Works thing, I've never been part of FCA, but I do know Jorge Vallejo, who was nominated, and I do know Jorge does a lot of great work. So, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, people can have their own opinions on it. I know Jorge does a lot of great work for the community that he serves, and that's a good thing. Doesn't mean that everybody has to do it, doesn't mean that everybody has to agree with it, but you can't diminish the work that he puts in, and he's benefited a lot of kids. So FCA's done a lot of great work with soccer in this city, as many other organizations have for many other different reasons. Soccer in the Streets did things one way. America Scores, which is an organization that uses creative writing to engage kids in soccer, has done a lot of great work on that side. FCA has done a lot of inner-city soccer programs as well. You can have your own beliefs, but you also still, for me, I do think that Jorge does a lot of great work, and that was kind of a shame to see. But all I'm going to say is this. I truly believe y'all means all, and that's all I can say. I can't speak for other people. That's all I got. I hate that we get into this stuff sometimes because it does seem to separate people, and it really shouldn't, because that's not what this game should do. So let's get back to the game a little bit, and let's talk about it. Hopefully everyone can respect one another and just be part of the whole package of soccer. So, Leagues Cup last night. I want to get into this with you, John, because we didn't really know what this tournament was going to be. We didn't really know how this tournament was going to feel. We didn't really know how it was going to look. The Liga MX teams came in with first-choice lineups, Cruz Azul and Tijuana last night. The MLS teams did not. Feels like it maybe should have been reversed. It's a tournament that all the conversation after CONCACAF Champions League is, well, it's hard for MLS teams because it's at the beginning of their season, and Mexican teams are, over a month in, and they're in form, and yada, yada. Well, now it's not. And the LA Galaxy side, I can somewhat give them an out because you're talking about playoff stuff, although you've got plenty of time.
And Portland this weekend.
No, I don't care about this weekend. No, Tijuana plays this weekend. No.
I'm just saying that's what GBS said.
Well, I'm saying that's BS. That's what I'm saying. The other side is the Chicago Fire. They're not playing for anything. What do they have left to play for? I guess maybe if they go on a tear that they've never been on, you don't play for that. And this type of stuff is causing it. because you have an opportunity with your stadium 3/4 full of Cruz Azul fans, by the way, and people who maybe don't come to your games on a regular basis. You have an opportunity to show them why they should come see your team on a regular basis. And you don't. You don't play your starting lineup from the jump. Why? And I'm sorry. I'm with Mike Petke and RSL on this. You can argue if you're at the player level. You can argue all the way across the board about, the tournament shouldn't happen. And I agree. Jay Riddle had a great tweet this morning. You're adding competitions in a season where you've compressed the schedule. That's dumb. Totally agree. Not the year to add it, but you did, and it's an opportunity for your club. Why are you not grabbing it with both hands? Mm-hmm. I love that RSL is doing that. I love that the Mexican clubs are doing that they're coming in and playing first choice. They're early in their season. Why can't the Chicago Fire of all teams say that, you know what, maybe if we win this thing in 3 games, that would be the best thing that could happen to us this season because we don't have anything else to hang our hat on.
And we'd have a trophy as we go back downtown.
You'd have some cash. You'd have something. One's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. Here's their lineup last night. Back 4. Andre Reynolds, Diego Campos, Grant Lillard, Marcelo. Midfield of 5. Amando Moreno, Bronico, Herbers, Gutjahr, Frankowski, with Nikolic up top. Your bench, Calvo, who came in and played 32. Kappelhoff, who didn't. Basti, who came in and played 32. McCarty, Mihailovic, who didn't. CJ Zapong, who played 26. Richard Sanchez in net. David Osted staring.
So you played Andre Reynolds, 18 years old, who I don't think had played in MLS before. Instead of playing Jeremiah Gutjahr at left back where he normally plays, you played him in holding midfield to get Reynolds into the team. That's fine if you're mixing him with a lot of regular guys. You play Grant Lillard, who should have been playing at some point this season, but he hasn't been. It's another young player that the Fire don't really seem to do anything with. But this is what's frustrating about Chicago is this is the argument. Well, we gave young guys a chance in the Leagues Cup. Yeah, you just threw a bunch of them together with no real coherent setup and said, yeah, go beat Cruz Azul. No, that's not how it's going to work. And they lost 2-0, and it could have been worse. The Galaxy, you do have to give the LA Galaxy some credit here in, one, coming back and finding a result with a less than first choice lineup. That's impressive. You get the penalty shootout, so you do move on to the semifinals. You get a goal in the second half from Dave Romney after you'd fallen behind 2-1. All that's really good. Probably shouldn't have happened, and I'm assuming Oscar Pareja is going to be a little upset with his squad when you're getting knocked out by a team that started Ethan Zubak, Kai Koreniuk, Emil Cuello, guys who you don't see very often. Servando Carrasco, you don't see all that often as a starter. You did see Emma Boateng, who's been a starter in his career, not so much this year. Efrain Alvarez, who is becoming a starter. Giancarlo Gonzalez was the captain. You got him another game. Araujo. Romney's played plenty. Skalvik's played plenty. But that's a heavy rotation for the Galaxy, and they found a way. Good for them. But it still feels like a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the Galaxy rundown and you see Armel Don Chilao got 28 minutes. And if it weren't for Matt Lamson, you wouldn't have advanced. Or you can look at it as just poor penalties that were taken.
Poor penalties. I'm not giving Lamson a ton of credit on that one. That was a bad penalty. I think Lamson leaned one way and then dove back the other way. It was so weakly hit.
Wow, that's a slow one. So yeah, when Xolos does what they end up doing, and I mean, you look at the numbers, and Xolos dominated practically all the categories, 20-7 on shots, 5-3 on target, and they had almost 2/3 of the possession. But you go to penalties, and what happens. It turns out to be the roll of the dice, and Lamson gets the Duke. But for me, going back to the RSL point that we had, this seems like an opportunity, and then an opportunity lost for MLS sides that come in, and you want to prove yourself against the biggest rock on the shoreline right now in this hemisphere in Liga MX. You have the chance to do that. So what do? You trot out heavily rotated lineups. You get bounced. Then you go back to your league play where you're either fighting for a spot in the postseason or you're not going to get one by the time you're done. It is a lost opportunity. And I think the discussion that we had earlier in the week where I was trying to think, was it Tafka who came up with the idea of perhaps having the winner of this get a CCL spot or treating this like Europa League or something like that?
No, this is already treated like Europa League. That's what it's going to be because you're getting your teams that don't qualify for CONCACAF Champions League from MLS that are going to participate in this. What Tafka said is Open Cup people would get into this. This is about money.
Yeah.
This is about a trophy, and yeah, it's not a great prestigious trophy just yet, but it takes time. But this is about money, and this is about prestige. And when you're the Chicago Fire, and your form guide, if you're the Chicago Fire, since May 18th, where you lost in San Jose 4-1, you've got one win to show for it. And yes, it was against Atlanta, and it was not a good night. You've got 4 draws, and you've got 6 losses. You got nothing else to play for. Why are you going out there and throwing out a lineup like this when you actually have people in the building? It's a wasted opportunity, and these are the reasons why the Chicago Fire are in the situation they are. And we'll get into that more in the next segment about moving to Soldier Field and rebranding and all these things, but this stuff is part of it. L.A., all right, they've got a game against Portland coming up. They've got things they've got to worry about. I still think they could have fielded a little bit better lineup. But anyway, they got the win, so you can't really say much. They won. They advanced. Can't really say much. Chicago, you can say a lot because this is something that I've never understood when you have these games. And this is a game that actually is part of a competition, and I'm doing air quotes on competition. Yes, it is. It's not just a friendly. Friendlies, I think you can treat a little bit differently, but still, you're asking people to come out and pay their money. And you have an opportunity in a game like this one, in a game in a big friendly against a big team, where you're going to have people come out and sample your product. They're going to say, hey, I don't go on a regular basis to watch Chicago play Cincinnati in league play, but Chicago's playing Cruz Azul. My family loves Cruz Azul. I'm going to go watch this.
Uh-huh.
And they come in the building, and they're like,
throw that in there.
What's this nonsense?
Uh-huh.
This team's awful. They play bad soccer, and who are these guys? I don't care. I'm not coming back. And that's what happens. I remember a game very specifically here in Atlanta, Silverbacks Park, where Cruz Azul came and played the Silverbacks. Believe it was 2006. Might have been 2005. No, it was 6 because it was after the park opened, 6 or 7. It was the first big international friendly, and it was pouring down rain, and it's on turf, so they played it, and the place was absolutely jam-packed with a lot of Cruz Azul fans. And it was a good game. Silverbacks played, obviously you're talking about a lower division team, but Silverbacks played a first-choice lineup. They competed. I think it was 1-0 Cruz Azul. It was a kind of a scrappy game. Good effort from the Atlanta players, and I heard people around me say, hey, I'm going to come back to a game. This team's pretty good. I like the way they play. They fight. I like this. It's an opportunity. And it's one thing if you are worried about legs and playoff races and this and that. If you're the Chicago Fire, you have no excuse. You just wasted another opportunity with people in your building that might actually come back again.
Check and mate, sir.
It's frustrating when you're that, because then you get into the situation about should you rebrand, should you change the name, all of these things. Look, if you shoot yourself in the foot, yeah, you're going to have to rebrand at some point. That's what it is. Leagues Cup as a whole, should it be a big deal? Is it a big deal? It's not a big deal yet, but should it be? Should it be done differently? How can it be a bigger deal? These are the questions that I have for you guys who are listening on a Wall Pass Wednesday. I will share Sam Stejcall's tweet. He tweeted, spent a good chunk of the day talking to people around MLS about Leagues Cup. Best line, quote, please don't talk to me about this dumb thing. It upsets me. I'd love to know if that was a staff member or a player or what, but man, that's not good. John, what would you do to make this a bigger deal? Like, how would you make this actually something that the Chicago Fire would say, you know what, we're going to play our first choice lineup because it's the Leagues Cup?
See, I mean, for me, I like the idea of giving you a CCL spot. I think that it comes with time, sadly. And I know that when you have this first impression and then you have what the Fire put out there, it puts a bit of a pall on the whole thing. But for me, being the pragmatist, I'm sitting there thinking I would probably take 3, 4, 5, and 6 when it comes to points in MLS and make those your 4 teams, or points per game, or however you want to come up with whatever mathematical formula, and let it be those 4 teams that are not number 1 or number 2 playing an MLS Cup having the chance to go in being MLS champ or whatever.
They've already got that. I don't think that's not the question here about who qualifies. Like, they've already got a qualifying format. I'm with Tafka. You could get to where you involve the Open Cup in qualification and the finalists and all that. I'm cool with that. But what else can you do to make it a bigger deal? Like, picking teams this year, look, you just got the thing off the ground and you chose.
How much build-up did we really have with this tournament?
Very little. I mean, we don't know where the semifinals are going to be with the Galaxy and Cruz Azul. And some of it depends on what happens tonight. But still, like, things like that, this year's not going to be what it.
No, it seemed like it was rushed when it was put together, but that just may be the lack of exposure leading into it. But this seemed like a rushed idea to get everything on the board.
Yeah, 100%. But long term, I think you have to figure out where you're going to put it in the calendar. And some of that could have something to do with the U.S. Open Cup potentially changing their schedule around a little bit. We talked about it yesterday. You could have the first round of that tournament March-April timeframe instead of beginning of June, which would either move it up in the calendar or space it out more. Any which way is interesting because it could affect where Leagues Cup falls. I think with CONCACAF Champions League at the beginning of the season, you can't put it there. So roughly around this time frame is okay. You want to get it done before the true playoff push. I think that's a key. For me, honestly, I think it's really simple. This tournament becomes a big deal if you have a sponsor attached to it with big prize money.
Yeah,
period.
True.
Because it's not the CONCACAF Champions League. It's not the Copa Libertadores or any tournament with a prestigious trophy. It's a brand new thing. Call it cash grab. Fine. Then make it a cash grab. Make it a true cash grab. Get a corporate sponsor on top of it. Make it the whatever Leagues Cup. And put a prize of the same as CONCACAF Champions League, which I think is like $2 million for the winning team. And bonus money if you advance. Like good bonus money in each game if you advance. Do it. Whatever
Yep.
It's going to be, that's how it changes. Cash. Because it's not something that's going to get you into a World Club Cup or anything like that. It is a trophy that will
take up space.
It'll get you. No, I mean, it needs to be more than that, but it becomes more than that if there's prize money attached to it. For me, it's just that simple.
Before we go to break and finish the Leagues Cup discussion, I will give you a series of quotes. Please tell me who said them. Quote, "We are trying to put the best available players on the field, and this is the best lineup we could assemble for today."
Veljko Paunovic.
The guy. Ding.
I didn't know that, actually, but that just sounded like Veljko.
They deserve more respect was how he led that particular quote. Citing fatigue, injuries, and other issues as the reasons for the limited availability of his roster. The guys who played, continuing quote, that's how they have to play when they have the opportunity. There was a different spirit, a spirit that we need from now on, and we're going to use this performance and what we saw today to prepare the team and redirect against our next opponent.
Yeah, I hope they
Alex
do.
Campbell.
I hope they do. Honestly, those comments sound very similar to Tata Martino about the Open Cup, and that's fine. I mean, that was the situation, especially in 2017, that Atlanta was in, because you had injuries, you had fatigue, and you didn't have a USL team for players to get those minutes in. So, you had to just throw guys in and get time. And that's where Chicago is. You're throwing guys into that game who aren't playing together because you need to get them a game. That's 100% true. That's definitely true. But if you're going to make this tournament a big deal, that's going to be the other side of it, is MLS. If they're going to brand it as a big deal and they're going to tell us it's a big deal, when the Mexican clubs who are early in their season are fielding first-choice lineups and the MLS teams are not, but it's a cash grab for MLS teams, that's a bad look. If you're going to schedule it and you're going to do it, and maybe the next CBA has an impact on this because this was kind of tacked on, and they had the ability to do it based off the previous CBA, but maybe you're going to set up a rule where you enforce that teams have to field competitive lineups or something like that they're going to be obligated to do it. Because I think Chicago could have fielded a better lineup than they did, even with fatigue and injuries and so on and so forth. But when you're getting the majority of MLS teams that are involved in this thing this year telling you that it's not a big deal and we're not playing people, only one team has said it's a big deal, that's a problem, and the league has to figure that out. And honestly, I think they figure that out with money. It becomes a bigger deal if there's a bigger check involved at the end. It's honestly that simple right now. You're going to create something new, it's going to have to be worth it. And the way it's worth it is to get paid. That easy. We'll get into your thoughts on
everyone
League
showed
Cup.
today.
What's that?
I was going to say, let me finish the quote. Everyone showed today they're available for the team. They're ready to perform. We'll always put in the guys we believe are ready and we believe can get us a victory.
Oh, that sounds great. It sounds wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't, and they weren't that good, and they missed an opportunity to impress in front of people who were sampling their product, and that's the biggest issue from a Chicago standpoint. So, Give us your thoughts on Leagues Cup on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. We'll get into that. We're going to talk about the Fire a little more in detail and what they should do. Should they rebrand? Should it be the Chicago something else? Should it be the Chicago Soccer Club? Should it be whatever? Let us know what you think about what can save the Chicago Fire. It's not all the way down to hashtag save the fire yet. I think there is a hashtag going on around that, though, about not changing the name. Let us know what you think on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. We'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Closing out hour number 1 of SDH, July 24th, Wall Pass Wednesday. Your questions. We'll try to have answers, or we'll make some up. We'll do our best to try to seem smart. We'll try. We make no guarantees. That's it's on the back of the T-shirt. We make no guarantees here at SDH. But we will take your questions on a Wall Pass Wednesday. Please tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. We've got some. I want to get your thoughts on the Chicago Fire situation, and do they need a full rebrand? I'm kind of torn on this one, honestly, because it's a damaged brand.
True.
I don't think there's any way to say that it's not. But do they need to change the name? How much value does the name have at this point? I don't know. I don't think it has a lot for the majority, but I think it has a lot of value for some. And do you lose that to trade off for getting more people in the door on the whole? It's a tough balance to strike, but a rebrand I do think is desperately needed. I just don't know if they need to change the name. I'm really not sure.
What was that thing that was floated? God, was it 6-9 months ago? Chicago City Soccer Club or something like
I
that.
believe that's right.
Drew the ire of a lower division team in the area when they tried to float that idea out, and they were like, "No, we've already got that."
Well, they were Chicago City Football Club, and I think the Fire were reportedly going to rebrand as Chicago City Soccer Club, and I'm sure they picked that because the other one was already chosen. So it wasn't exact. I do remember that much.
You look at the Fire today, and for me, it's just always something that's been there as the notification of professional soccer in Chicago. You sit there and you think Chicago Fire. But because, and I see where you're coming from when it comes to, I don't think they need to go the CCSC route. But I think that if they came about it with a fresher look, a fresher approach, some kind of a rebranding, I think that Chicago Fire should always be Chicago Fire. I mean, of course, just ask the Metro Stars about that. But I've always thought that Chicago Fire should always be that. But I think that as they're coming back into town, I think that they need to have some kind of a campaign to sit there and go, old place, new attitude, whatever, something to sit there and differentiate and try to put all of the negativity from Bridgeview in the rearview mirror as quickly as humanly possible. And I think it's going to be incumbent, and this is going to be where somebody really earns their money, is how do you present the Chicago Fire returning to downtown? And I'm sure there are a lot of different iconic ways to do it, but this is where someone's really going to have to earn their money, and you've got to hit all the right notes coming out of the blocks, because you can't just do something this large and turn it into a clunker coming out of the garage, because there's no, what's the phrase? There's no second chance to make a first impression. That first impression coming back to downtown has got to hit the right notes all across the board.
Yeah. Peter Wilt, who, if you don't know who Peter Wilt is, he was the original general manager of the Fire. He's went on to launch Forward Madison in USL League One, launched the Chicago Red Stars in their first incarnation, I believe in the WPS. I think it was WPS is where they first stepped in. Also involved in the launch of Indy 11. Very well-respected soccer executive, and I think he gets how to launch teams better than anyone. He was instrumental in launching the Fire, and obviously he has strong emotional ties to the name. And he released a letter, tradition, honor, and passion, period, #Save the Fire. It is a thing. Talked about how it came together and all of that. And if you don't know the story, please check the letter out. We'll retweet it here in a minute. Thanks to John Dolazar for sending this our way. Peter also gave kind of his opinions of it and the branding, and obviously he is on the side of keeping the name. I'm fine with that. I don't have any strong opinions that it has to be changed. I don't think a name change here guarantees success. For me, the issues are bigger than the name. Really, the only strong arguments about changing the name are the previous history of the brand, which would really be for the last 8 to 10 years. Because launch in 98 through the Cuauhtemoc Blanco years, I think, were very good. Blanco drew fans to Bridgeview. Bridgeview is not the only issue. That's something you do have to keep in mind here. I do think moving downtown will help them in a big way. I think it makes them a bigger deal. They were a big deal when Blanco was there. I don't think you have to change the name. If you don't, I do think a refresh of the brand is needed. I do think it's something that should take place. Don't know how much you want to change the logo. The logo also has a lot of history here too. Plays off of I believe it is the firefighters badge in Chicago, and the name references, the Great Chicago Fire. The team could have been called the Rhythm, the Chicago Rhythm. That was what I believe Nike wanted them to be, and Peter Wilt talks about it in his letter. That's awful. Chicago Fire is far, 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 far better. Then let me ask you this. If we're going to be on the side, we're going to agree with Peter, because I think he makes a very strong argument and a very good one. Okay. Don't want to change the name. Don't want to change the logo too much.
Yeah.
How do you rebrand? How do you change the idea of what the Chicago Fire are then?
If I were creating the campaign, I think it would be something incredibly similar to what the Red Stars did at the beginning of the season, for anybody that remembers their rollout. And it's players in the community, interacting with fans, interacting with supporters groups, having barbecue, going to Wrigley, making sure that there's a certain oneness about it. I mean, you can't hang your hat on results. You can't sit there and say, yeah, we've won one of our last 13 and we're coming back downtown. Doesn't work. So I think that you have to go as community and as grassroots in your representation as you can, and do it door to door and do it block by block, and make sure that you're out there and sound familiar. Making sure that
I will say to that though.
Yeah.
The Chicago Red Stars, great campaign, beautiful campaign. Yes. The community work is very good. They drew 17,388 in Week 14 for the first match back with their World Cup players back. Their total attendance for the season, they drew 17,300 in Week 14. Their total attendance is 43,100. All that wonderful branding did nothing. They averaged 4,000 people a game last year, which is not bad. I don't think it even comes down to this. The more that I think about the Fire and their history and what has worked in Chicago, I think it's honestly very, very simple. You go out and you sign a big player and you show a commitment to winning. Because True. I don't think they've shown a commitment to winning since Cuauhtemoc Blanco left. Period. It's honestly that simple.
Chicharito?
It may be, but it's more about who's going to help you win. If that's Chicharito, great. There's two routes here on that side of it, because you have to upgrade the product on the field. You go for a big name like a Chicharito because he's a big name. Now, I think he's going to score goals in the league. I think he'd be successful. I think he'll give you both. The flip side is more along the lines of what Atlanta's done in terms of getting top young attacking players and thinking about it from a business perspective, but you also have that commitment to winning. I don't think the Chicago Fire have demonstrated a commitment to winning since Cuauhtemoc Blanco left. And it shows. It shows in the fan base. It shows in the attendance. That's what has to change. More than the name, more than the badge, more than the colors. That combined with going back downtown, because if you go back downtown and you put this product on the field, awful. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have more
Price is
eyeballs
Right
on
loser
it.
music.
Well, you're going to have more people looking at it. That's
No doubt.
the thing, is right now they're just an afterthought. Nobody cares. So nobody's even talking about it. You go back to Soldier Field and you stink, nah, you're going to get lit up. And then you are going to have to talk about bigger rebrands. I think the rebrand is a commitment to winning. And I think the rebrand is making moves to put a better product on the field. And the question that the Fire have to ask is, have they not been served well by the current leadership and manager? And I don't know. It doesn't appear so. I don't think they have a talented roster. And I don't think they've done as much as they could with the roster they have. I think they need a fresh start on that side. More than a name, more than a badge, more than anything else. They need a fresh start on the soccer side. That should be the rebrand.
I thought that signing Veljko Paunovic to a 3 was a bit much, because I didn't see the evidence in hand that was worthy of that the new 3-year contract. But you're kind of stuck with this albatross.
No, you're not. You can pay him off. That's the problem. You've done it, but if that's the issue, then you should wait till it's up before you move to Soldier Field. If Paunovic is the issue and you're not going to buy him out because you signed a bad deal, well, moving to Soldier Field doesn't change anything next year, and it potentially makes it worse.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, if you screwed up on the contract, you screwed up on the contract. You got to figure out what's going on here.
You might have to eat it.
You might. I mean, let's be honest. This is a team that I think Blanco's last season was 2009. 2010 didn't make the playoffs. 2011 didn't make the playoffs. 2012 lost in the knockout round to the Dynamo at home, by the way, 2-1. 13, no playoffs. 14, no playoffs, 6 wins. 15, no playoffs, 8 wins. 16, no playoffs, 7 wins. 17, 16 wins. Playoffs, lost in the knockout round at home, 4-0 to the Red Bulls. 18, no playoffs, 8 wins. Horrendous.
You keep saying the same things. Yeah.
Since 2010, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons where you didn't get 10 wins. Since 2010.
Yeah.
This isn't recent. That's why people aren't showing up. The rebrand is actually take the soccer seriously. That's the rebrand for the Fire. I don't think anything else is even needed. I mean, you can do some little tweaks and you can come up with an advertising campaign. All that stuff's fine. You need to do that anyway. That's not a rebrand. The rebrand is being committed to actually putting a winning product on the field. We're going to take a break. We'll get Mike Conti's thoughts on that. We'll also start to look ahead to Atlanta and LAFC on Friday night. Maybe the game of the year? It's up there. El Trafico will argue with it. Others will argue with it. But it's one of the biggest games of the year. And it's going to be a big night for MLS Friday night. Atlanta and LAFC. Mike and I will be there. We'll start talking about it right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today. at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, Soccer Down Here, July 24th, Wall Pass Wednesday. We're taking your questions. We're taking your comments throughout the show on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. Mike Conti from 92.9 The Game joins us right now. What's up, Mike?
What's going on, guys?
Not much. We need your input on the Chicago Fire situation.
Yeah.
Are they going to change the name? Are they not going to change the name? Do they need a rebrand? Do they not need a rebrand? For me, they need to actually show that they care about the soccer part of it, which is kind of the most important part.
I agree. I'm conflicted on it. I understand. There are some very, very valid reasons to rebrand.
There are.
If you're going to Soldier Field, it's almost like you get a fresh start. You can create a new identity. You want to distance yourself from some unpleasant memories lately in Bridgeview. I understand the whole search engine optimization aspect of it, where if you Google Chicago Fire or type Chicago Fire in on Twitter, you get a, kind of mediocre primetime show on MTV or on NBC as opposed to the soccer team. I know that's a problem. However, Chicago Fire had a lot of very, very positive things happen in the club's infancy, a lot of historic things. I don't like just running away from history and abandoning it for the sake of rebranding because it'll help us give a fresh start. So I wonder if there's some kind of compromise where maybe you keep the name, change the logo and the kits. Maybe you change the kits and the logo and you incorporate some element of Chicago Fire in that, like in a heritage kit, but you change the name. I'm very, very conflicted on it. I see arguments on both sides, but what you said, Jason, is spot on. I think Chicago is a sleeping giant of a market for MLS, and it was a very successful market at one point, and it can be so again, but they're at a point right now in this season, like you and I have talked about off the air, Jason, where they just need to blow it up. Blow it up and get value for a guy like Alexander Katai, who's probably not going to be there next year anyway. Trade him, get some kind of TAM-GAM deal or a player even, and start really thinking about rebuilding the soccer element of what they do from the ground up. And that might even include changing the manager, Veljko Paunovic, although I respect that he has done some very positive things in this league too. But I want nothing more than to go to Chicago next year and walk from our hotel to Soldier Field as opposed to get caught in traffic for an hour.
Yes.
And have a respectable, 30,000 spectator crowd there and have a really good game day atmosphere and have it work in Chicago, because I think there are a lot of good soccer fans up there that want it to work. But you've got to be credible from the on-field standpoint. And that's why Atlanta United was so successful right off the bat, because they were credible on the pitch. It wasn't some kind of carnival attraction where they piecemealed the team and people were just going to be happy to have MLS in Atlanta. Arthur Blank was very serious about putting a competitive product out there from day one, and that needs to be the approach of the Chicago Fire or Blaze or Lakers or whatever the heck they're going to call themselves.
The only name, before you jump in, John, the only name that would be acceptable if you change it would be to go back to the Chicago Sting history. That'd be it.
Oh, there you go.
Chicago Sting were they an indoor team at one
and then
point?
MISL.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I remember the Sting coming to Philadelphia a couple times with the orange ball MISL.
Yeah, they moved into that when the NASL crashed.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, we've seen other MLS teams embrace that kind of history. Seattle Sounders, Portland Timbers, Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's one with some value. It has
Absolutely.
It has name value in Chicago, so that's the only thing. I mean, if it's the Chicago whatevers or Chicago City, I don't think it does anything. But whatever you do, it's just got to be a better product on the field.
I mean, I think the good thing is we're having a passionate discussion about Chicago Fire. If a rebrand is what we need to get passionate about, that's still fine. I think Chicago, again, is a very, very vital market in MLS. I also think there's a possibility that they could be moving into the Western Conference with all the expansion teams coming in. If you look at it geographically, Chicago's on that line where they might have to be moved into the West. That's another way where you can kind of get off to a fresh start without having to necessarily rebrand, where you can create some rivalries. You already have some existing rivalries with some Western Conference teams, but really, really go fully into creating some rivalries in the West, being a competitive member of the Western Conference, and that's something that doesn't even require a name change. Your schedule is going to look a lot different. The teams who play at home will be a lot different, and that in and of itself might be enough to help them push the reset button.
Because I'm fairly certain these days, Mike, the last thing you need is a whiz or a burn when you're discussing the Fire.
Yeah, sometimes they can even be linked, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to. But I think it speaks to the issue with Chicago when you're talking about the number 3 media market in the country, and you refer to them as a sleeping giant in MLS. That to me sends off a lot of large flares when you have to combine those two elements in the same sentence.
It's a shame, isn't it? They aren't on linear TV in Chicago, and they have no radio. That's really a shame. I mean, at least in New York, Red Bulls aren't on terrestrial radio, but they do a radio broadcast, and they're on linear TV. New York City is on terrestrial radio and is on linear TV. LA Galaxy is on linear TV. LAFC has a very good terrestrial radio deal. So it works in big markets. I mean, I would hate to hear this argument that, well, they're in too big of a market to get noticed. That's not true. Everyone needs content. So I think that's going to be very, very important to all this, too. And I don't know what ended up happening with Chicago Fire and why they had to do a deal with ESPN Plus and get off WGN radio. But, I mean, that's huge. That's huge to getting any kind of foothold in this rebrand or refresh or whatever they do. They've got to get a foothold in the media in Chicago. They don't have that right now, and they've got to get back to that.
Yeah, that they need to be accessible, and I think that's the teams that are successful in this league are the ones that are accessible, whether it's location, whether it's media coverage, whether it's their TV, radio. All that's very, very important to crossing over because, I mean, most importantly, I think the soccer bubble is big, but that's not your whole fan base that you need to make your money to be sustainable and be successful. And I don't think any of that happens if you don't commit to putting a better product on the field.
Yeah, and it might be a matter of just one guy. If you sign the right guy. When we were in Chicago, I think when we were walking to Lou Malnati's, we were talking about Chicharito, weren't we, Jason?
Yeah,
you bring in Chicharito there.
That opens a lot of doors.
Absolutely. So it's really not that hard. It just takes a financial commitment. But I think the fact that they're spending whatever kind of money they are to break the lease in Bridgeview and pay rent at Soldier Field is a signal by their ownership that they are willing to spend and do what it takes to be better. So if they can do it from the player standpoint and bring in a guy like Chicharito, good. Whatever it takes to make the league bigger and the third largest market in this country is very important for the league.
John, before we start looking ahead to Friday, Michael Ruiz had a question for Mike. Linear and terrestrial, what does that mean in layman's terms?
Sure. So linear TV, if you have rabbit ear antenna on your television or you get cable straight out of the wall or out of a cable box, that's linear TV. In other words, anything other than streaming. Okay, so in Atlanta, Channel 2 is linear TV. ESPN, because you get it over cable, is linear TV. This is something we talked about during CONCACAF Champions League, how there was a Spanish-language broadcast of the Atlanta United matches on linear TV, Univision Deportes, or whatever they've rebranded to now. So if you have cable and you subscribe to that, it comes to you on linear TV. You don't have to hook a laptop in. But to get the English-language broadcast on Yahoo Sports, that's non-linear, okay? That's streaming. You're basically taking it off a computer or out of the cloud. Terrestrial radio, again, is like 92.9 The Game or 680 The Fan or WSB radio. It comes off an antenna into your car radio. You don't need to stream it. You don't need to pull it over the internet or anything like that. So that's what we're talking about. And, I think we're extremely fortunate here in Atlanta that the club has linear TV and terrestrial radio, and it's very, very strong as far as the outlets that carry them on both sides. Not every team in MLS has that. LAFC doesn't have it. LAFC streams their television broadcast on YouTube TV. They do have a very, very good terrestrial radio deal with ESPN 710 out there, but not every club has that. In fact, we could probably count maybe on 10 fingers the clubs that really do have strong linear TV and terrestrial radio deals. Minnesota comes to mind right off the bat. Cincinnati comes off right off the bat. So it's not many. And I've made the argument before that whether or not it's true, I feel like there is this perception out there that if you aren't on linear TV, you are not important. I think that perception is gradually changing over time as more people stream TV and younger people consume TV. But I think that, we've talked about this. The league needs to proceed with extreme caution on this new TV deal in 2021, where they're going to apparently bundle the local TV rights into the national TV deal, which I think is going to mean a lot of ESPN Plus, Flow Sports, whatever, for the local broadcast of these matches. I think that would be a tremendous mistake at this point. I think in order to be perceived as being a big league up there with the big four in North America, you've got to stay on linear TV.
But and the key to the whole streaming element is making sure that you get it right the first time, because when you look at something like Flow Sports and their relationship in DC and the other things that they try to do, they have had more hiccups coming out of the blocks, and then you risk people turning away from that kind of technology to try to get their information, and it ends up the possibility of being more detrimental as you're trying to go into the future with something like that.
And DC is a double whammy because they don't have radio. So, I mean, it's not like if Flow Sports crashes, you can turn on your radio and at least get it that way. So, 100%. And I'll be curious to see what those negotiations look like, and if owners that have NFL interests intervene, like Arthur Blank and Jimmy Haslam and Stan Kroenke. Well, I doubt it with him, but Robert Kraft, because the NFL, I think, really understands that in order to really monetize your TV deal, you've got to stay on linear TV. And I'll be curious to see what influence, if any, the NFL owners are going to have in that TV contract. I mean, it's still, 2-3 years away.
Right.
So we're a long way away from this being a big discussion. But, to answer your question, that's basically what linear and terrestrial means.
Yeah, and you could get a little bit of a sample if NFL does a package on streaming as a dipping their toe into the water type of situation, which they've kind of talked about here and there.
But even there, Jason, like they streamed Buffalo-Jacksonville on Yahoo,
right.
But the broadcast was still made available over the air in Buffalo and Jacksonville.
Totally agree. They have to find that balance. You can start to head in that direction because, I do think over time that's going to be more common, but right now it's not, and there is that perception issue. Well, we've talked about LAFC a little bit from the off-the-field side. Let's talk about them on the field. This is, in a lot of ways, the more that we get closer to it and the more we start thinking about it, This feels like one of the biggest games in Atlanta United's history. I mean, it feels like a really big one Friday night.
Well, I did a little research, Jason. So against, against the top 4 finishers in the league, Atlanta United has not won a match in the regular season against a team that finished in the top 4 in the league since they beat NYCFC early in the 2017 season. It's been a long, long time. And they've never beaten it. In fact, of teams that have finished in the top 10, they have only once beaten a team on the road, a team that finished in the top 10 in the league. And you'll never believe what it was. Last year in Columbus.
Yeah.
And Columbus finished 10th. So, I mean, it seems a certainty that LAFC is going to finish in the top 4. They could probably lose out and still do that. They're on their way to the Supporters' Shield. If Atlanta United wins this match on Friday, it is the biggest regular season win in the history of the club, and I can't even think of a remotely close second. That's how big the match is. It is also a road match against a Western Conference team where if you do not win, if you come away with 0 points, you have not really damaged anything as far as your goals to win the Eastern Conference in the regular season, get home field throughout the playoffs going into Cup, get in the CONCACAF Champions League. And this takes me to a point that Julian Gressel made on 92.9 The Game this morning when John and Hugh were talking to him. And he said something that raised my eyebrows, but I loved hearing it. He said, this is going to be a rare opportunity where we can go out and just play free. He said, we have not been good on the road at all this year. We know who we're going up against. We know that it's going to be very, very difficult to get a result. So maybe we can just go out there and let it all hang out. And I thought that was very, very interesting, that this club can go out into a match now, really, for the first time I can remember in my 2 years doing this, with a nothing-to-lose mentality, with absolutely nothing to lose. If you get a result out there, it's one of the greatest, most unexpected results in club history. As long as you don't get humiliated out there, you have done nothing to damage your goals for the rest of the season. So I'm going to be very, very curious to see what it looks like, and if indeed they do play freely on Friday, and how that's going to translate, because I think there is the potential for a lot of goals both ways in this match, for some very, very entertaining soccer. Atlanta United last season only had 1 win against a team that finished in the top 5 in the league in the regular season. And that win was against LAFC when they beat them 5-0. And LAFC really, really collapsed at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, especially at the end of that match. So if Atlanta United throws some punches at them, LAFC, I think you and I, Jason, have not been really confident in how LAFC can respond to being punched, their counter-punching ability, if you will. I think there's a real opportunity for something very special Friday night for Atlanta United.
Yeah, it feels like a litmus test for both teams.
And, Mike, I think all we really have to do is look at El Tráfico and the sound that happened after that in the post-match, where you look at a team like the LA Galaxy, and they came in and punched LAFC right in the mouth, were very physical, and yes, they got Zlatan, which is another deal entirely, but Bob Bradley was worried about intensity, and they got out intensity to create a phrase. And so if you have a team that comes in like Atlanta United that treats it with the respect it deserves, as they will, I think that this creates more questions when you're looking at LAFC, not just in the short term, but in the long term, possibly for the remainder of the season in the playoffs.
John, I'd be really surprised if LAFC was not up for this match, especially just having lost in El Tráfico, being at home, being on national TV, with, by the way, ESPN running promos nonstop all week. I don't know if you've noticed that. We have ESPN on at the radio station all the time on one of the monitors, so you almost can't miss it here. But, yeah, I mean, ESPN's promoting the heck out of this match. I would be really, really surprised if LAFC was not up for this, if they were not game for this, because this is an opportunity, too, for LAFC to prove a point, to kind of disprove some doubters. They've lost 3 of their last 6, if you include Open Cup over Portland. So they've been, a tad bit wobbly. I agree with Jason. I think it's a litmus test for both teams. I think Atlanta United will get a good opportunity to see how they match up over the next 2 weeks, really, against two teams that I think have an inside track to go to the MLS Cup final. But I go back, if you watch the Foreman-Frazier fight from Jamaica, and you watch Howard Cosell's commentary, Cosell at the beginning of the fight when Foreman was starting to pummel Frazier, he goes, we're going to see tonight Frazier's ability to punch and his ability to take a punch. And I think we're going to see LAFC's ability in how they can take a punch. And they have not done a very good job this year, as good as they've been, in taking a punch. When things go well for them, they get out to quick multi-goal leads and they kind of hold on. And they pile on from there. The first goal in this match on Friday night is going to be massive, especially if it is scored by the visitors. And that's why, again, I kind of like this let it all hang out mentality that, hey, we're just going to go out and have fun and play freely and let's see. Because if you can produce an early goal or produce an early penalty against Ismail Elfath as the center ref, who gives a lot of cards and issues a lot of penalties, you can have the opportunity to get on the front foot early and then kind of play defense and hold on.
It's a big opportunity, and it feels like there's really little at risk. It's at a point in the season where, you're not worried about the mentality. If you drop this, it's something that you can really take a lot out of. I think no matter what happens, you can take a lot out of this if you're Atlanta United. I think the pressure's on LAFC.
Yeah, with the caveat that you don't want to get humiliated. If it ends up being 5-1 like it was in Chicago, then I think that can be a tad bit demoralizing, and that's going to crank up a lot of external chatter that no one really has any time for right now. The external chatter,
for sure. I think if there's a red card situation, then that's a whole different conversation,
sure,
like Chicago was. If it's 5-1, 5-0, finishing 11v11, then you're going to have something that can come out of it. But even then, you have time to regroup and fix what went wrong. I think this is the first time that you're pretty close to full strength. You're not going to be all the way there, but you're going to really get a good test against a top opponent in a difficult place to play and see where you stand 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah, and I think they're up for it. I think they're in a really good spot mentally. I had a chance to spend time with Justin Miram last night, and for those of you who came out, thank you. It was a great event. Justin has a future in stand-up comedy. He's hilarious. And let's just say he is not over what happened in Orlando by any stretch, but I'll tell you that story later. He is not over it. But anyhow, Justin kind of made that point too. He joked, I don't know if I'm getting on the plane tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to play. But he sounded really confident. He made it sound like the team has really prepared very well up to this point, that they're really going to dig into the film, but there are some things they've noticed on film with tendencies that they might be able to go back upon Friday night. It's almost like, I don't want to say quiet confidence, but I don't feel like this team is in any way, shape, or form nervous or intimidated by this challenge at all. And Atlanta United has been, you got to say, guys, I know that, they have 8 losses in league play, 10 across all competitions, but there's been a certain kind of unflappable element to this team this year where things came awfully easy to them at times last year. Things have not been easy this year because of all the injuries and match compression, and yet they go about their business. And after everyone thought they were dead and buried, they've snapped off 3-1-1 over their last 5, including wins over DC, who was second in the East, and a draw against Red Bulls. And your one loss in there was a competitive loss in a well-played match in Seattle where it's impossible to get a win. So I think they're fine. I really think they're fine. I think they're going to be up for it. It's going to be very, very tough. But, if you get out of there with no points and you don't get embarrassed, that's not the end of the world, like you said, Jason, because there's still 11 regular season matches left, and Open Cup and Campione's Cup, and there's still many, many paths to achieving your goals for the rest of the year.
It's going to be a big one. Go ahead, Mike.
Just real quick, since we mentioned Leagues Cup, what's your vibe of Leagues Cup so far with LA getting through and Chicago stubbing their toe with a heavily rotated line? What's your overall vibe of the thing?
The Leagues Cup's not going to gain credibility and become a big thing that I think it can be if you have teams like Chicago putting out lineups like they did last night. That was embarrassing. Cruz Azul, I think I saw a tweet from someone that the referee was running faster than Chicago Fire last night. Galaxy Xolos was actually very entertaining. And I was able to look in on that a couple times. That was good. A little disappointed by the crowd there, especially, playing Xolos. I would have thought you'd have pretty close to full house at LA Galaxy. But here's the thing. Campeones Cup and Leagues Cup is not going to be big unless we treat it like it's a big thing. Same mentality that Arthur Blank has had for Atlanta United. And I'm a little disappointed in some of the press coverage I've seen, especially about Campeones Cup locally. In the media, I don't think we get to decide if this is a big thing or not. I think we have to cover it like it is any other match and not editorialize about it being a waste of time or an indictment of a Liga MX's MLS relationship. We need to cover it like we would any other match. And I've been a little bit disappointed that I think there's been a little bit of a demeaning tone to the media coverage, not just locally for Campeones Cup, but nationally for Leagues Cup. And we've got to get past that because I think this could end up being a really cool thing and a lot of fun for fans and a lot of fun for the clubs. But the clubs and the fans need to take it seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's been a lot of editorializing nationally about Leagues Cup rather than talking about it. And not only that, let's dispel this notion that this is a CONCACAF Europa League. That's not true at all. The Confederation is not involved in this. This is a joint venture of MLS and Liga MX. Let me make something clear, because I think some of that is something I said, too. I know a lot of people yelled at Doug about it. We talked about it on Southern Fried Soccer. I said it's like that because for MLS teams, it's a situation where the teams that don't go to CONCACAF Champions League would be next in line for Leagues Cup.
Right.
So it's similar to a Europa League qualification situation. It has nothing to do with CONCACAF. It is an opportunity for MLS and Liga MX to work together and make money. And obviously, that's why you're going to do it. And I think this tournament becomes a bigger deal if there is money involved. But from an MLS side, that's the way you get in. Just like if you were in the Premier League and you don't get in the Champions League, you would be able to get into the Europa League. That was the way I was saying it.
No, and I get that. And that's not really what I'm talking about. I think there's this perception that Europa League is kind of this obligation runner-up tournament that no one's really happy to be in, as opposed to Leagues Cup, where I think there is something bigger in play, where MLS can get a bigger foothold in Mexico, which is very important. And Liga MX can get a bigger foothold in the United States, which is also very important. So this doesn't feel like Europa League, where it's like, oh, shoot, we're in Europa League and no one wants to be there. We want to be in Champions League. To me, I think there's a bigger goal in play here. And the stronger that MLS can be in Mexico, believe me, is critically important for the growth of MLS. And, maybe I'm pie in the sky a little bit, but I do think that Leagues Cup will be an avenue to helping to grow MLS in Mexico.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can come off like a Europa League in that you didn't make Champions League, and it is the second-tier tournament, because it is. But there's an opportunity, just like Chicago last night. My frustration with the Fire, you had a bunch of people in that building last night who are not coming out to your matches, and you did not give them any reason to come back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And they were not all Cruz Azul fans.
No.
So that's unfortunate. But
even the Cruz Azul fans, though. I mean, even them who are, they might live and die with Cruz Azul, and they might, on a Saturday night, if both teams are playing, they might stay home and watch Cruz Azul. But there's going to be opportunities where they want to go see a live match, and if they enjoyed it, they're going to say, you know what, I really like the way that Chicago Fire team played. I like the way Jordi Mihailovic played. I want to see him play again. Cool, there's tickets. I'm going to go. They were given no reason to come back.
That's why I like what Mike Petke has been saying about RSL taking this seriously. I like what Darren Eales said about Atlanta United feeling Campeones Cup is prestigious. More of that, please. Less of what Chicago did last night.
Yeah, it's not serious if you don't take it serious. I mean, it's just that simple.
Right.
So we will see how it goes. Friday, we will not have a morning show, a normal show. It'll be kind of like our road shows where there will be a Friday morning taped edition that goes out, and then Friday.
So who's Bob Hope and Bing Crosby?
You're both, I guess, because I don't know. I'm not claiming either one. Mike and I will do a Q&A from L.A. at some point Friday. There's a big time change to deal with, and the fact that we're getting in late Thursday night. So we'll let you know about an hour ahead of time. We'll give you plenty of time to send in your questions, and we'll do what we've done on the road on Friday.
In-N-Out
it won't
Burger
be a normal
near
show.
you.
Is that?
I missed that, John. What did you say?
No, from an In-N-Out Burger near you.
Overrated. Supposedly, there's a great food hall at LAFC Stadium, so we might go over there a few hours earlier than usual and see what they've got. And don't forget, by the way, 2 p.m. today on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page, we'll have stoppage time. A lot to go over.
Yeah, and you can get questions in there too. Thanks, Mike. See you in a little while.
See you guys.
We're going to take a
Be
break.
good.
Come back right after this with more of your Wall Pass Wednesday questions and comments. Be right back.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, July 24th. Wall Pass Wednesday. Let's get into the Twitter timeline. What are the peeps saying, John?
All right, let's go back to the absolute beginning because we actually had some stuff in off time that started the whole thing. Caleb Wright. Based on his moments of brilliance and his recent run of form, P.T. Martinez has proven himself to be a very talented player and I believe is very close to becoming fully adjusted to the team and Frank DeBoer's style of play. Hashtag Wall Pass Wednesday.
Yeah, well, I think Frank's also realizing how P.T. plays, and as crazy as he is, because P.T. Martinez is crazy, we all know this. That's what they sang anyway. I think he's starting to realize how to use him as well, and it's finding the balance between the two. I mean, there were a lot of comparisons yesterday. A lot of advanced, statistics and metrics came out. American Soccer Analysis is a great website to dig into that stuff. And there was a lot of comparisons between like P.T. Martinez's season this year compared to Ezequiel Barco's last year, comparing everybody to Miguel Almiron's season last year, which nobody compares to that season. But something that people kind of grabbed onto about Pitti was the quality of his passes as measured by American Soccer Analysis and using Opta data and all that. I think one thing about Pitti is he tries things that not many players would be willing to try. So sometimes he will try a pass that might be considered a low-quality pass, but if it comes off, like the one to Joseph, to seal the match on Sunday, it's an amazing play. He will try stuff that others don't. He'll take those risks. I think something that Frank kind of mentioned when he was getting tired in the Montreal match is you have to know when to do that, when not to do that. And that was something that Frank had a frustration with, and it sounds like Pitti had a frustration with Frank having a frustration about it. But that's a balancing act. It's a good thing when you have players who have that confidence and have that ability and that swagger to do things that others won't do. I love those kinds of players. I love players that can play that way. But there is a time and a place, and that's the balance. Is you can't do that in every spot on the field. You have to know when you can and when you have to just keep it simple. I think that's something Ezequiel Barco leans a little more towards the simple, although he is willing to try things, and he will, and he pulls them off as well. But he will lean more to the simple, the connection, as opposed to Pitti, who always wants to try stuff. And you just got to find the balance sometimes. I think Pitti's done a better job of that in recent matches as well. And some opponents are going to give you more opportunities to try things. Some situations in matches are going to give you those opportunities. Other times it's going to be tight, and you're not going to have as many opportunities, and you have to, in some ways, dial it back a little bit.
Thomas Gouin looked at the power rankings that were brought out by the national folks. More evidence of at Longshoe point regarding coverage and treatment of Atlanta versus others. Atlanta has weeks with tough road games and gets knocked for not winning. Red Bulls get a pass when they lose to Toronto 3-1 and beat a very mediocre OCSC 1-0. Red Bulls are fourth in the power rankings. Atlanta United is eighth.
Move on, please.
All right. Didn't know how long the laugh was going to go. Daniel Price. So straight in the Leagues Cup. Fire got thumped. Galaxy game was much more interesting than I thought it would be. Good showing by the Galaxy B team. We'll have to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, it's good showing from them, and that's something you can hang your hat on. That's great. When you can rotate the squad and get the result, that's amazing. I think we said everything about the Fire part of it. It's just they're not good enough to rotate their squad and get results. Their first team's not getting results, so it was a wasted opportunity for Chicago in a tournament that could have given them something to hang their hat on this year. For the Galaxy, hey, you move on, and we'll see how they handle the semifinal against Cruz Azul now.
Nathan Pugh had his question addressed when Mike came on about this Friday night being the most important regular season match, but the biggest in Atlanta's brief history.
Yeah, I'm feeling that way too. It's the closer we get to it, I'm like, man, this is big time. There's a few that, I mean, you can look back at. I think the Red Bulls match recently had that kind of feel. The match in New Jersey had that kind of feel. The match last year at Yankee Stadium, to a degree, had that kind of feel. The match at Red Bull Arena last year in September had that feel for sure. Those are the ones that come to mind. I mean, 17, everything was so new. I think the match at home at Bobby Dodd against NYC had that big match feel. I think the Orlando matches in 2017 had that feel as well, because it was the first time for those games, and you played the same team in a week down there and in here, and you had crazy finishes to both games. So the second one especially had a big match feel to it. Playoff matches, obviously, but regular season, yeah, this feels like the biggest one. I really can't think of a match that feels bigger than this one. Maybe the trip to New Jersey last year, because of where it fell in the season and where things were. But this feels like the biggest thing we've seen in regular season for Atlanta United.
A couple thoughts from Daniel Price. He wanted to know what thought about Josh Wolf getting named the new head coach in Austin.
He's been close to getting jobs before. I figured it was just a matter of time. But then when he took the assistant job with the national team, you thought, well, maybe he'll stick there for a little while. It's a great opportunity. I mean, it's starting from scratch. He'll get to do everything from day one. They have nothing yet, and he'll be very involved in all that. It's It's a unique opportunity. It's hard to turn down. I think from the Austin side of it, it's a lot to put on a manager who has no first-team experience. It's a whole lot to put on them. And you have to get this right, because if you don't, that's going to be the number one thing people come back to. If Wolf struggles is, well, he didn't have any experience coming in. How could you expect him to do well with an expansion team? He'll get to build it the way he wants. He'll have nothing, no baggage to deal with. That will give him every opportunity to get it right. But it's a lot of pressure to get it right in your first gig. And we'll see how Wolf handles it.
And then Daniel about Leagues Cup, he's like, for the League Cup to matter to me, it needs to be worth something. And we talked about the ideas where it could. Otherwise, it's simply a cash grab. I want to care as a fan. If the club doesn't really care, why should I?
But that's the thing. I mean, yes, it's a cash grab. I think no one can argue that it's not. But you can still take a cash grab seriously. And for a team, there's more cash to grab the further you advance. So, yeah, it is what it is. But it doesn't become bigger if teams don't take it seriously. And that's why I've been really happy to hear the comments out of RSL about this, and really disappointed to see, kind of in hindsight types of comments from Veljko Paunovic after the match about respecting their 11 and this and that. It was a wasted opportunity for the Fire. That they could have done more to show that this actually mattered, and they didn't.
Lewis Martin. Yesterday, Doug Robertson over at the AJC gave some ideas about how to make MLS more compatible with Liga MX, like 2 young DPs, 5 DPs, 35 on the roster, less paperwork for academy and USL players to make the game day roster. Your ideas. Keep up the great work.
Ooh, that's a lot. I have not read the piece, so I can't comment specifically on what Doug said. What I would get into with some of that, and I'm going to pull that up here so I can kind of hit it point by point. The young designated players, I think, should be separated out from designated players. They should be 2 separate designations, because right now you get different cap relief, but you still have 3 designated players, period. And if they're young DPs, regular DPs, it doesn't matter. I would separate that out. That would give you a way to incentivize signing young designated players. And that would be a way to push teams into doing that, and then realizing that, hey, we can make some money on this deal. Just like TAM, for me, I think was a good move because it pushed teams into doing things in a different way from a business perspective, which they needed to. That's great. This can be a similar way to do that. So young designated players, if it's just 1 or if it's 2 and it's separate from the designated player rule, I would do that. I would add at least 1 more designated player. This is all off the top of my head. This is not with being in anybody's pocket, by the way, because I don't have the money to spend myself. This is what I think would make the league better. At least 1 more designated player, at least 1 young designated player that is separate. So that would give you a total of 5 designated players. 4 regular, or you can have a young designated player crossover, but 1 dedicated young designated player spot that can only be filled with a young designated player. All right. More TAM, yeah, definitely. Because I like the way TAM has made teams sign very specific types of players. That's a good thing. Because if you just lumped it into a salary cap thing, I don't know if teams use it the same way. And I don't know if it's time to get away from that yet. If you do, okay. I hope teams use it the right way. But however you do it, if it's more TAM, or you take the TAM and the GAM and you lump it into a salary cap, but you increase that, either way, you've got to increase the spending in the middle of the roster just like you do at the top. I think that's key. The roster size, 100%. You have to increase the roster size, and not just with more reserve or supplemental roster spots. You need to increase the senior roster past 20. I would say I think 5 more spots is what Doug had recommended. I'm okay with that. Going up 5 more spots is good. I do think something that goes along with it, and I know in Lewis's tweet he mentioned Academy/USL players being incorporated more. Academy, you just can't. And that's because of NCAA rules. And that is a very unique issue in the United States. If a player is not on a professional deal, they would give up their college eligibility if you brought them into an MLS roster on some kind of a deal professionally to do it. I don't think you would be able to come up with a way that would satisfy the NCAA for a player to play in MLS matches on an academy deal. They've been able to do that in USL. If they can stretch that to MLS, great. I don't know if they can. I just have a feeling that the NCAA, as much as anything, is not really paying all that much attention to the USL Championship, or they're like, it's like minor league, that's fine. MLS, I think they'd have more of a problem with. I'd love to see it. I don't think it's possible. But USL players who are in the club, the clubs that have their own affiliate, they should be able to play matches. Limited number, because then you can't allow teams to sign guys to USL deals but use them in MLS. Essentially like a two-way deal in the NBA, where I think they have limitations in how many days they can be on the main roster. Something like
10-day
that.
contracts.
No, not 10-day contracts. That's different, because that's just a separate. That's a contract. I'm talking about the two-way deals where a player is signed to the Hawks, but they're on a back-and-forth deal with the G League, and they can only spend a certain amount of time with the first team. That would be the way I would approach it, to where you're not able to just sign guys to USL deals, stash them there, but then play them in MLS, because teams would try to exploit that. So two-way deals, essentially, to be able to have USL players play in MLS to stretch that roster even further. More roster, I'm cool with that. Young designated players being separated from the DP situation, at least with one slot that is specifically for young designated players. I like that. Another designated player, more TAM or more salary cap, whichever. I think the CBA is going to probably define that. Whichever way they'd rather go, I'm okay either way. But you have to have more money to spend in the middle of your roster. I think those things will make the league better, and it's time to do it. It's time to invest. I don't think every team in this league is making money yet. I don't think they're making big money, or they haven't recouped losses from previous years. I do think that's the case. But the franchise valuations do point you to the direction that things are growing, and growing in a good way. And I do think there are teams that are making money. You're going to make more if you invest more. And that's where it is. I think those valuations are going to increase even more dramatically if you bring in your Chicharitos, if you bring in a Memo Ochoa, if you bring in more young South American players that can then be sold. All of that will make it a better quality league. It will bring in more money in the long run, maybe even the medium run. It will require an investment in the short term. And that's something the owners are going to have to commit to. And if not all of them will, but the majority will, then I think you're going to be in a situation where you'll start to see more separation within the league in terms of haves and have-nots. And if that's the evolution, that's the evolution. I think this league has done a really good job to give everybody a chance to be competitive every season. You can't guarantee it, though. You can't guarantee that the Chicago Fire make the right signings or get things right or hire the right coach or what have you. You can't completely eliminate a team just being bad. You give them the opportunity to be good because of the cap, because of some of the restrictions, and I think that benefits the league as a whole. I really do. I don't think MLS would be better if you had a La Liga situation where you had two teams, maybe a third, maybe a fourth that are competitive year after year, and that's it. I don't think that would make the league any better. I really don't. I think the league, from a competitive standpoint, that serves it well. But if there are some owners that just cannot spend at the same level, then their teams are not going to be as good. Although the league is going to give them chances to be at least competitive. And those owners are probably going to need to sell and have other owners come in who can take it to another level. And I think that's going to happen more and more over the next 5-10 years. And that's okay. That's the way it'll grow. That's, I think, normal business. So it's time to invest a little bit more. Not crazy, not stupid money, not eliminate designated players. You can just sign whatever, eliminate the cap. None of that. But you have to increase investment, and I would do it in a targeted fashion to make it a better product.
In the NBA, rosters were expanded from 15 to 17. Those 2 spots went to two-way contracts, and it appears that it looks like you can only spend about 25% of your time on the calendar during the league schedule with the NBA team. 45
great
days.
Model. I really do think there's a lot that MLS can learn from the way the NBA has structured these types of things. I think that's a brilliant model for USL. That's what you should do. That exactly there, and figure out the percentage. That's fine, but that's another way. If you're having problems getting teams to commit or getting owners to commit or whatever about just going up 5 roster spots, well, incorporate two-way contracts, and they can only spend or they can only play a max of like 10 games or something. Whatever you want to figure out. That would be a really good way to do it. And that would be a way that when a team is in the situation that Sporting Kansas City's been this season or Atlanta United's been in the season where you have a bunch of injuries at one spot, you've got Guillermo Benitez. You can bring him up on that two-way deal and then have him play a few matches in MLS. And if you want to keep him after that, you got to sign him to an MLS deal. That'd be fine. That would be the way to do it. That's actually the model right there. And I have always said I think MLS should incorporate elements of the bird rules when it comes to re-signing your own free agents. You should be allowed to go over the cap on that. You should be incentivized to re-sign your stars. And if that means you go over the cap, if it's a designated player, then you're able to have them, be a bigger hit on the cap or whatever. Cool. Whatever that part works. If it's a player who's not a designated player, yeah, you should absolutely be allowed to go over the cap to re-sign your own guys. And young players, like players you developed, there needs to be an even greater incentive to keep them if they want to stay.
Two-way players paid a corresponding daily amount based on the number of days they play in each league. Only players in their 4th NBA season or earlier are able to sign two-way contracts, which can be for either 1 or 2 seasons.
That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. I'm completely fine with taking that rule, modifying it for MLS USL, and doing it. That would be a great way to manage it. The difference is in the NBA, they own the G League. USL does not own USL Championship. They would have to create the partnership to do it. I think it would be an age restriction, but also maybe even just a designation. I mean, maybe it's just a situation where, all right, if they're under this age, then they can fill a spot on a USL roster that would give them the ability to be a two-way player. And they're limited to 8 games in MLS or 10 games in MLS. And when they're in MLS, they would get paid whatever that amount is. That's a flat amount. Done. That would be the way to do it. That should be your model. Use that, create it, adapt it, boom. Problem solved.
Percy Herrera and a bunch of other folks wonder if players can opt out of the All-Star game down in Orlando the way NFL players can.
Yep, but you get suspended for the next league match. That's the problem. They did that because they didn't want players to opt out of the All-Star match. Zlatan opted out last year and had to sit out the next league match. Others have had to do that too. So, yeah, you can, but then for Atlanta United, for example, if you opt out, then you're not playing in the match against the Galaxy. Yee.
The Colonel, Morning Colonel, also applauds Pancho Villa's Army for their position on the goal kick chant. However, I attended the Gold Cup Championship match and got to say, most Mexican supporters either didn't get the memo or don't care what PVA thinks. Hashtag Wildpass Wednesday.
It's not going to happen overnight. I think everybody knows that. It takes vigilance. It's not going to happen because people tell you to stop doing it. There are people who don't get the memo. There are people who don't care. But I do think that number is lessening that are doing it. I think it has gotten to be less of a thing, and it's going to take time. You have to stay vigilant on it. It can't not say it when it happens. Can't ignore it when it happens because, well, we're trying to get rid of it. No, that's not the way to do it. Keep mentioning it. It's inappropriate. It should not be happening. But also have some patience that it's just going to take a little bit of time because you do have to change a cultural behavior. You do. And it's something that there are a lot of people who will tell you that it is not intended to be homophobic in any way. It's not. And that's not how they say it. That's not how they think it or any of that. All that's great, but it is. And now it's been basically said by the Mexican Federation, by FIFA, by Pancho Villa's army, by players themselves. It's inappropriate. We don't want you to do this. But it takes time to change that behavior. So I'm hopeful. I think it's gotten better, but yeah, it's not gone yet.
Austin at Bring Into Beef, spinning off of the roster question that we just had. Thoughts on expanding the rosters or adding additional DPs to assist with more matches being played? I understand it may affect parity within the league, but I think it's important for the overall product.
You can't, though. Like I know people have said, well, if a team's in CONCACAF Champions League, they should get a bigger salary cap or whatever. You can't do that. It's got to be across the board. And it should be across the board. Like for me, I don't even think it should be a question. Like, yes, you have to do it. You have to increase it. But it can't be for just the teams that are playing in Leagues Cup or CONCACAF Champions League. It has to be across the board for everybody. And it's time to do it. It's time. If you want to have teams win the Leagues Cup and win the CONCACAF Champions League, they need a deeper roster. They need more money to spend on better players. They need to be able to keep players that they want to keep. They're going to do that if the league is higher quality. There's lots of things that go into it, but for me, I just keep coming back to an increase in spending. And it needs to be across the board.
Kurt McGirt is completely here for a fire rebrand. 50% as a lover of design, 50% for the wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Yeah, there will be the wailing and gnashing of teeth. I've really come back around to don't rebrand, just actually care about the soccer. I do think you could do some things with the badge, and I know that there's some mock-ups of badges out there that could be replacements. I wouldn't want to eliminate the current badge. I think it does have some good heritage and some good things to play off of. If it becomes kind of a secondary badge in some ways and you do incorporate a new badge that you work with, all right, I think you can balance that. I think you can freshen up the colors a little bit if you go, however you want to do red and blue and shades of red and blue, or, blue becomes a bigger deal than red. I don't know, however you want to do it. For me, though, nothing matters if you don't improve the quality of the product. You can put whatever branding on it you want, whatever fancy packaging. If it's bad soccer, it's bad soccer, and people won't come.
KFC is of a mind of adding 5 or 6 X's and turning it into a plural of some sort.
What does that mean?
With the rebranding of Chicago, I believe.
Okay.
The Fires. Katie Weaver. What do we think Atlanta's approach to Campeones will be now that we've seen what some MLS clubs go full B team in Leagues Cup? I almost see it more an exhibition at this point because of schedule compression.
I don't think Atlanta cares what other teams are doing. And it sounds like from what Darren Eales has said consistently is that they're going to treat it as a big deal. I think they will. I think they will go with a pretty first-choice lineup. Atlanta's lucky in that they do have a lot of different rotation options. There are some positions that they don't, and that's going to be an issue. But there's some positions that they do, and I think they will take some advantage of that. Dion Pereira or Justin Merrim, for example, Pity Martinez or Ezequiel Barco or Brandon Vasquez. You have some different things you can do and still field a strong lineup, and I do think it'll be a strong lineup. Being one game and being a little different than a Leagues Cup match gives you a little more, I think, incentive to take it a little more seriously. It's at home, too. Should have a good crowd, although tickets have been a little slow. Club America, just got into this, so it's going to take a minute. And I think with Club America fans, there will be a strong walk-up if there are tickets available. And I do know tickets are kind of high. It's a MLS and Soccer United marketing event, and it's priced as a big deal. We'll see what the crowd ends up looking like. I think Atlanta will take it seriously. I think there'll be some rotation, but they'll take it seriously.
And Austin says maybe rebrand the crest and the colors, keep the name. He says he's seen some stuff on social media he thinks that could work. Ike Man thinks the Fire should do a complete rebrand but still tie in original branding into the new, similar to the flame thrown into the FC Dallas rebrand to honor the old Dallas burn.
Yeah, you could go that way. I don't know. Chicago's in such a weird situation with it for me because there's teams that we've seen that needed a rebrand, and it's been successful. I think Kansas City is a prime example. The Kansas City Wizards, the Sporting Kansas City, it feels like a completely different club, and it needed to, and they've done a really good job with it. I don't know if Chicago Fire is as bad of a name as the Kansas City Wizards were at that point. I don't think it is. I think there is more history there. I mean, the Wizards had won an MLS Cup, and the Fire have as well. I think the Fire have a little bit stronger tradition. There is value in the name. I just don't know how damaged it is locally, and that would be my question. Like, if they change the name, for example, so let's say they change it, they change the branding, they move to Soldier Field, does that get media attention? Does that get casual soccer fans interested? Does that get casual sports fans interested? Does that get the international community of Chicago interested? If it does, and if it results in dollars and tickets, do it. I don't know if it does, though. I honestly think the bigger issue is the product, because I think the Wizards never really drew well. The Wizards were never really a strong business. The Fire have been, and I think they have been when they were good. And they've been really bad for a long time. I really don't think any kind of branding change is a thing if the product is not good enough. I would almost rather see them go for it on the player side. Go sign a Chicharito instead of paying to rebrand, because it's going to be an expensive rebrand if you do it. Yeah, it doesn't come cheap because you're changing everything.
Plus, you get the Bridgeview buyout.
That's off to the side. That has nothing to do with this decision. What I'm saying is flat out, if you've got $10 million and you could spend it on a player or on a rebrand, spend it on a player. I think it's a better use of the money. You're already doing the Bridgeview buyout. That has nothing to do with it at that point. That ship sailed.
Drew Gano, I've become more and more impressed with FDB's tactical inside adjustments and his spot-on substitutions. As much as I love El Tata, I think we'll ultimately have more long-term success with FDB. Hashtag Wallpass Wednesday.
They're different, and they're related, and I think they have more similarities than people give them credit for. But, yeah, they're different managers. I think Frank de Boer is probably far more prone to make changes on the fly than Tata was. Tata was more about a consistent group and a consistent team and letting them figure it out. He didn't really make a whole lot of changes. Both approaches can be successful. It doesn't have to be either or. I really do like de Boer's tactical changes week to week, game to game, half to half. And I think he's been really good with his substitutions. I think the idea of what Frank is trying to transmit in terms of being a team that is in control, in possession, with the ball, wants the ball, is something that you can create through a whole club. I think Tata's style was not necessarily about that. It was about the first team being successful. And I think he was getting towards more of the elements of the possession style in 2018. Frank came in and did it from day one. That was what he wanted to do. It wouldn't have been as successful if Tata hadn't been going in that direction. It would not have. That gave him a platform to work from. So they go hand in hand. But yeah, I think Frank will be successful. I really do. I think in the long term he will be, and I think he gets the in-game decisions very well.
Thomas Gwynn back, and he asks, when is MLS going to introduce WAM to give the teams freedom to bring in everything she wants? Maybe bring in some young guns or bad boys. Just please wake me up before you go spending all of it. I love a good transfer saga. Hashtag Wildpass Wednesday.
That was Thomas Gwynn. That wasn't Paysanino.
It says Thomas Gwynn.
I think Paysanino hacked into his account. That is some ridiculousness, Thomas, but I like it.
And you got some work to do for Christmas in July tonight up at the Fraction.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Eichmann, how much do you think the impending TV deal in 2022 will impact the 2020 MLS Players CBA? Surely every team knows the revenue from that deal is coming, even if they don't know exactly how much yet.
Yeah, it has to. I think the last TV deal was done after the last CBA, if I'm not mistaken. I think that will have an impact as well. I mean, you're basically in a situation where you're making money on TV as opposed to blowing money on TV. That's a big difference. And the next one, you should make even more money. So, yeah, I think it will have a huge impact on it. I think that's something the players will be arguing. And the TV money from not just the league deal, but the league's cup deal, those types of things will be very important as well. So there's more money to work with, and the players are going to want their fair share, and they should. So now it's about dividing it up, and I really hope that they can do this in a intelligent, quick way, so you don't have a whole bunch of drama and you don't have any hints of a work stoppage, because that would be very bad for the league at this stage. It needs to grow. The players need to make more money. There is more money to give them, and it's just dividing it up in the right way.
Then Eggman back to the goal kick chant. He says, I don't think the goal kick chant's any worse than some of our supporters group chants when taken into cultural perspective. I think both should go. Pretty ironic how we discuss no bad language in the stadium and then let the supporters group drop F-bombs.
I do think it's worse. Cultural perspective is a different element of it, absolutely, but I do think it's worse because the chants are not targeting a player or a group of people in the same way that the goal kick chant does. I do think there is a difference. Doug's blog and Doug's comments really got people riled up. The thing about the stuff with the chants, for me at Kennesaw, that game where Doug mentioned it, it was a probably a different group in the supporter section than usual because it's a smaller group. And you had a different setup in terms of getting chants out there and starting things and all of that. I think it was a little more difficult because you didn't have a capo stand, for example. The chants were very repetitive in that one, far more than they are on a regular game day. And I think the chants that were repeated were the ones with F-bombs in it. I'm not a huge fan. I don't have a problem if fans yell things that are salty or F-bombs or whatever other bombs you want to drop. I don't care. I'm not a big fan of it being organized. That's kind of, I think you can be more creative. I think my bigger issue with it wasn't even so much that it was F-bombs. It was more of the fact that these are chants that are done in so many different stadiums around the world, and they're not unique. I love when, there are unique elements to a supporter's culture. That's what is more exciting to me, when Portland sounds like Portland and Seattle sounds like Seattle and Atlanta sounds like Atlanta and Manchester City sounds like Manchester City. When it's just the same chants being done in all of those places, it's not as unique. It's not as cool, other than yelling a F-bomb in public, which, yeah, that was cool. I remember doing that when I was a kid. It was exciting. It's not that cool. So I think it's different than the goal kick chant. I really do. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's not the same argument. I don't consider them the same.
And then the last conversation on the board is going back and forth with Thomas Nguyen and Colin OCSC. Colin says Atlanta getting scrutinized just like the defending champs in every sport ever. You're not going to convince anyone Atlanta is being treated poorly in the media. And then Thomas went after it.
Yeah, Colin is an Orlando City fan. And
yes.
An Orlando City fan retweeted Thomas's original post about Atlanta being 8th in the power rankings, Red Bulls being 4th, and playing off of what I said yesterday about coverage and treatment in Atlanta never getting the same consideration that Toronto got, for example, which was my biggest argument. Is Toronto was the defending champs in 2017. They were not scrutinized in the same way that Atlanta has been. So Colin's not listening to the show, so he's not hearing the whole package. And Thomas went on to continue to mention the Toronto thing, and that's what it was for me. I do think that the Frank issue as well for national media is still a thing. They still think it was a bad hire. I 100% disagree. I did from the beginning, and I still do, and I think that factors into it. But I think it was going on last year, too, in that Atlanta never truly got its due until the very end. It was after the Toronto game. Go back and remember. I can tell you specifically when I was sitting on the minibus getting ready to head to Yankee Stadium for Game 1 of the postseason, every pundit on MLS's preview show, every pundit picked NYC to advance over Atlanta. Every single one. Most of them by large scores. So, it's not the same. And Colin doesn't listen to the show. That's fine. Colin is a little biased towards the purple team, and that's completely fine too. But this has nothing to do with Orlando. It has to do with the way Atlanta's talked about nationally, and Toronto has been talked about in the U.S. media differently than Atlanta has, which makes no sense to me, and it never has.
Last one on the board from Michael Ruiz. The median salary in MLS is $150,000. At what median salary does MLS become competitive with Liga MX? 300, 400,000. Liga 1, median 650. The other four big leagues in Europe are from 750 to $1 million.
I have to dig a little deeper into it because I saw some average salaries where MLS was right there with Liga MX, but I think the median is going to be very different because the average can get skewed by the designated players and also get skewed the other way by the players on reserve and supplemental deals that are on very low salaries compared to your Zlatan Ibrahimovic's. So the median is what I need to look at, and I don't have those numbers across the board. So I haven't seen the Liga and other leagues' median salaries. I've seen the averages where MLS is far more competitive, but it's not balanced. I don't know what the magic number is. I mean, I don't know if there is one, to be honest. I think MLS has to be stronger in the middle of its roster, and I think it has to be stronger at the top to be competitive with Liga MX. And I go back to a team like Monterrey, who's not a typical Liga MX team. They're not your typical Mexican club. They're spending more than most teams in Mexico. They had, I think it would have ended up being like 10 or 11 designated players under MLS rules when they faced Atlanta United. Might have been 12. I don't remember the exact number, but it was a lot more than Atlanta had. I don't think Santos Laguna, for example, is in that same boat. I think Atlanta and Santos Laguna, from a spending perspective, are probably pretty close. But Atlanta is not a typical MLS team either. So that's where you're trying to find these balances. It's always going to be difficult. I don't think median salary and average salary does it because the top teams are going to be the top teams in each league. You need to compare top to top, middle to middle, bottom to bottom. I think that's the better comparison, and I just don't have the data. I'll see what I can find, Michael, though, and think about it a little bit. It has to go up. You have to have more spending. I think you need another star or two, and I think you definitely need another 2, 3, 4 guys in the middle of your roster. And for some teams, those are going to be guys coming off the bench. For others, those are going to be guys that start. That has to be stronger to be more competitive.
Anything else on your mind before we go?
We'll finish with this. Daniel Price shares it. Felipe Cardenas tweeted, and Daniel Price is freaking out. We'll hit the thunderstorm sounder. Brandon Vasquez limped off midway through a team scrimmage. Looked like a groin injury. Will confirm shortly. So we will see. Don't freak out too much. Could have just been a tweak. Really no information as of yet. That's from Felipe Cardenas. We will talk to Felipe tomorrow on the show, and then he will, I think he's going to be part, or is he not going to be part of our grand spectacular of tape coverage for Friday morning?
I have yet to ask Felipe if he wishes to be a part of El Gran Espectacular, but I will be more than happy to ask.
If there's more from our conversation tomorrow, cool. If not, everybody else will be part of that because there's a lot of people. And we'll get you set for Atlanta and LAFC. But tomorrow, Felipe joins us. Later today, stoppage time on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page, facebook.com/929 The Game. Then tonight, go ahead and say it.
Action at the Fraction, baby.
Atlanta United 2 and the Charlotte Independence. If you can make it up to Fifth Third Bank Stadium, it's Christmas in July. Santa United's going to be there. That's always a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There will also, I think there's some giveaways. I think there's some stuff going on with all of that. It's a
I think there's like some Christmassy bags and rather large. I don't know if there's a sleigh involved or anything like that, but I think that there may be wrapped gifts and things.
Lots of stuff at the Fraction, as somebody says it. And it will be on ESPN Plus as well if you can't make it out. It's a 7:30 kick, Atlanta and Charlotte. John and I will be on the call for that, and then we'll be with you tomorrow morning on SDH. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the interaction on a Wall Pass Wednesday. We appreciate it. Much plati, y'all.
Much plati.